This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
There's some tremendous limudim that we can learn from the Sedra. There's some tremendous hashkafa and musa that we can really learn from these psukim over here. I want to start with the beginning of the parasha as a continuation from last week. Now, last week's parasha, if you remember, we discussed in Parasha Shemois. We discussed Moshe Rabbeinu came on the scene. Klal Yisrael started going into Shibud Mitzrayim, the Avodas Parah. Klal Yisrael started working in Mitzrayim in a difficult way. And in the end of the parasha, the beginning of this week's parasha, we find that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Moshe Rabbeinu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you have been chosen as the Shliach of Klal Yisrael. You are the Shliach Tzibur. It's you who's going to take Klal Yisrael, all of Bnei Yisrael, out of Mitzrayim, out of where they are, and you're going to take them eventually to the Midbar, and eventually to Har Sinai, Kabbalah, Satoicha, v'chulei, v'chulei. Now, in the beginning of the parasha, we find, Parasha's Va'era, the Posek says as follows, V'yidavar Ekim al Moshe, v'yoyme Eilev ani Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shalom appears to Moshe Rabbeinu and tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I've got a message that you have to give over to Klal Yisrael. I want you to go to Paro, and I want you to tell Paro who you are, who you've come from, and what you're trying to do. To let Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, send them out. And we find already even from last week's parasha, and Chazal explained to us in different places in the Medrash, that the Rebbeinu Shalom came to Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't interested. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't so excited about this new job that he had of taking Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, out of the Shibud, of the Avodah, of the work that they had. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu, we all know the tsar that he felt. We said this last week. Moshe Rabbeinu went out, Moshe went out and he realized and he felt the tsar of Klal Yisrael. He felt believe, as she told us. That was last week's parasha. Moshe Rabbeinu felt be'emes, the tsar that Klal Yisrael were going through in Mitzrayim, how difficult it was for them, and how much he felt their pain. So we know that Moshe understood what it means, the tsar of Mitzrayim, what it means, the avodah that they put themselves through. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu really felt the pain of Klal Yisrael. And all of a sudden, the Rebbeinu Shalom comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, Moshe Rabbeinu, here's your opportunity. Here you can go and take Klal Yisrael up and out of Mitzrayim, away from all the avodah, away from the hard work and away from the slavery. And yet, this same Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Moshe Rabbeinu who really understood the real tsar of Klal Yisrael, and he went out and he realized it. That same Moshe Rabbeinu, for whatever reason it was, refused to be the shliach, to be the one, to be goyal Klal Yisrael from the avodah. And the shaila is why? Why wouldn't he want to go along? What a schus, what a tremendous thing it is to take Klal Yisrael, to be the chosen one, to take Klal Yisrael out of their shibud, out of the avodah, out of the slavery, and lead them to freedom. What was the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu refused to do this? So there's a medrash. I'm not going to speak out the medrash word for word, but I want to tell you what the medrash basically says. And the medrash explains as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu had no problem taking Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, taking them out of slavery. Moshe Rabbeinu was happy to do so. What was the reason? Explains the medrash. Why Moshe Rabbeinu refused? If he wanted to take them out of the tsar, and he really wanted to stop the avodah, what was it that prevented him? Answers the medrash very simple. He had an older brother. He had an older brother called Aaron. Aaron, who was eventually to become the Kohen Gadol, was Ki'ilu, the Gadol Ador Mitzrayim for 70 years beforehand. Aaron the Kohen was Moshe Rabbeinu's older brother. Can you imagine? Just take the scene for a moment. Aaron the Kohen, well, he wasn't the Kohen Gadol yet, but Aaron, tremendous tzaddik, he was the leader of Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim at the time for many, many years. And his younger brother comes along and takes over the whole world. His brother comes along, Moshe, and would take over the whole place and take Klal Yisrael as the leader. Can you imagine what Aaron would feel? Now, just for a moment, let me just stop the story for a moment to realize what we're dealing with over here. There's a motive of Medrash. The Medrash writes as follows. The Medrash Rabbah, Shmos Rabbah, says as follows. We always imagine this idea of Moshe and Aaron going to Paro and saying, all right, Paro, here we are, Moshe and Aaron. We're here as a shliach for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Let the Jews go. Very simple, nice. We've all got those cartoons and the colouring books that we all grew up with what Moshe looked like. Yes, with the stravel, not with the stravel, I don't know. And he went out with the big muscles, and he went to Paro and said, Paro, here I am, Moses, let my people go, right? That's the idea we sort of get. The Medrash sort of paints a little bit of a different picture. Says the Medrash, Rabbi said, this is amazing. The Medrash tells us as follows. Says the Medrash, in fact, the day that Moshe and Aaron went to Paro's palace wasn't an ordinary day. It wasn't a regular day. The day that Moshe and Aaron chose to go to Paro's palace was actually a day that Paro was being respected and visited by all of the visiting kings and big noblemen, Choshev generals, head of the army, head of the police, the biggest people in the country, the biggest people in the world. They were all coming to Paro. And they were all coming to pay tribute to him, to give him covered, to give him presents. That's what they were coming for. All of a sudden, amidst this amazing idea, this amazing day of Paro being respected and being given showered presents by the whole world, by all the biggest people in the world, there are two old men at the front door of the palace. Two old men, big white beards, like staff in their hand. And there's a knock on the palace's door. And all of a sudden, the people in the palace, they open the door like, what do you want? We need to see Pharaoh. We need to see the king. Like laughing, like, what are you doing here? Like, well, which king of which country are you? So he goes to the Paro, goes to the king and says, Paro, we've got two old men standing at the front door. They happen to be Jews as well. And you can imagine Paro says, okay, let's have a little bit of fun. Bring them in, boys. So they start coming in, right? You can imagine what's going on, right? The biggest kings, the biggest noblemen, the generals, they're all standing over there, they're all sitting around Paro. Wow, what an amazing day. Till these old men rock up and say, Paro, we're here as a shliach, as a messenger from the God of the world. A real God of the world, not like you that goes to the Nile and pretends that you're a God and goes to the toilet over there. Oh no, the real God. Let the Jewish people go. And you can imagine the scene. You can imagine what went on over there. Like, what are you joking? What are you crazy? Machinists? You coming here to tell me the most powerful king in the world that I should let all the Jewish people go? Like for what? Like, what do I owe you? Like, who is this king anyway? Who is this God? I never heard of him. I'm the God. I didn't know there's another one. So you can imagine how serious the situation was. Moshe Rabbeinu has the opportunity, being sent by the Rebbeinu Shalom, to take Klal Yisrael out of their tzoros, to take Klal Yisrael out of their Shiva Mitzrayim, out of their slavery, and yet he says no. What was the underlying reason why he said no? Tell us Chazal, in a tremendous idea which I think I'd like to speak about tonight, which is something we have to work on. And that is, he was worried. Moshe Rabbeinu was worried. Could be, maybe, possibly, if I do this job, and I take the shlichas that the Rebbeinu Shalom told me, it may cause a very slight sound to my older brother. My older brother's been the ruler of Mitzrayim. He was the manning of Klal Yisrael for 70 years. His younger brother comes along, new onto the scene, takes over the whole place, takes Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. Can you imagine what his brother would have felt? It was because of that. That was the reason that stopped him from taking HaKadosh Baruch Hu's offer, taking Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. Now we have to stand for a reason. We have to understand for a reason as well. The Ponovich Rosh Yeshiva, Pavarsky writes in Bad HaKodesh, a very interesting question. He says, 1 second. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't know this. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have his cheshbonis. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't realize what's going on. Moshe Rabbeinu, what are you thinking? The Rebbeinu Shalom told you. You got a direct link, right? Straight from God to you. This is what I want you to do. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu comes with all these cheshbonis. And why? Because maybe I'm going to cause tsar to somebody else. Maybe somebody else will be upset because of what I do. And if you see later on, we'll see Moshe Rabbeinu had a cheshbon. It's a very, very serious cheshbon as well. To cause tsar, to cause anguish to somebody else. It could be the biggest mitzvah that you're doing. And this about the was. He's following the Rosh's instructions. The biggest mitzvah in the world. But if you're going to cause somebody tsar, and you're going to cause somebody pain and anguish, none of it is worth it. That is what Moshe Rabbeinu's lesson is. Chazal tell us that the Rebbeinu Shalom for 7 days had to beg Moshe Rabbeinu, had to try and persuade Moshe Rabbeinu to take this wonderful situation, this wonderful opportunity, and to accept. 7 days it took the Rebbeinu Shalom. Why? Because for 7 days Moshe Rabbeinu was contemplating, I don't know what's going to be with Aaron. I've got an older brother, he'll be upset, there'll be some tsar, there'll be some pain, and Memela, because of that, it doesn't mean anything. I can't do something if someone else is going to suffer. That was the Yesod Rabbi side for Moshe Rabbeinu, and that was the Yesod of this week's parasha. There was a yeshiva in Bnei Brak that had a whole bunch of Rebbeim, like in the shiurim, Ramim, Rosh Yeshivas, Mashkichim. For whatever reason it was, there was a certain mashkich of the yeshiva that they had to dismiss, they had to fire him. Whatever the reason was, big Talmud Chacham, and the Maisa they fired him, and he went. A couple of months later, they approached a tremendous Talmud Chacham and they said, we'd like you to take this job of the mashkich. It's been open for a while since that person left the yeshiva. We'd like you to take over the job. So what happens is, he says, okay, it's a good shine, I'm going to ask Rav Shach. God done. No, so he goes to Rav Shach. And the Shach says to him, I don't think you can take the job. Don't take the job! So he goes back and says, I'm sorry, I can't take the job. And they were wondering, like, this was a perfect fit. This man was a real good, future mashkiach. What was the matter? Maybe Rav Shach understood something we never knew. Maybe he thought maybe he's not good. I don't know. They went to Rav Shach and they said, Rebbe, tell us, what was the reason why you said no? What was the problem? Tell us. So Rav Shach didn't want to say, no. Then he said, no, I'll tell you. So Rav Shach told them a lesson of this week's parasha. And that was, Rav Shach told them as follows. Rav Shach said, this person that left, this person that got fired and left the job, if he sees a few months later that somebody else took his job, even though it's correct, somebody has to take the job, but he sees that you took the job, it's going to cause him that little bit of tzar. It's going to cause him that little bit of pain. And for that, however great the job is, however much of a mitzvah, and zikar rabbin, you can give shiurim, and you can help people, but it's all not worth it if somebody else is going to suffer. It's all not worth it if someone else is going to be mitzar, if somebody else is going to have pain based on what you did yourself. There was a shul here in Yerushalayim in a certain area, and this shul in Yerushalayim had a Rov who passed away a number of months previous to the story. And they had a speaker, kosher guest speaker, that from time to time, every few months, they used to bring into the shul. And he was a tremendous speaker, a real dynamic speaker. And he spoke, everybody started crying, everyone was doing tshuva. It was a matzah. Every few months he came to speak. So it happened to be one Yom Kippur, right before Kol Nidre. This big speaker happened to be in the shul. He happened to be there. So the Gaboim came over to the speaker and said, wow, you happen to be davening in Yom Kippur, that's amazing. It's right before Kol Nidre. Right before Kol Nidre. Tell me something. I want to ask you. It's right before Kol Nidre. We have an opportunity right now to go and give a gewaldige shir, to give a shmooze. Be ma'oy with the oilam. You can bring everybody to tears. You can give everyone a gewaldige sichas musar in hashkafa and in shuva and in everything else. And he turned down the offer and he said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to refuse. I don't want to give a shir. And they were persuading him and said, please, you can give a share to everybody, you can give them mamish. People will be crying because of your share. He said, I'm sorry, I'm not speaking. Anyway, Kol Nidre passed, the evening passed, davening finished, and everybody went home. On the way home, his son turned to his father and said, I don't understand, Tati. You're such a good speaker. You have an opportunity, you could turn these people into Bali Chuvas overnight. All of a sudden, these people will, wow, they'll cry, they'll want to do tshuva, you'll get them into the mood. What is zikar rabbin? Why did you say no? So he answered as follows. And he said, such a powerful lesson. He said in that shul, on that night, in Yesus Noshim, in the ladies section of the shul, was the wife of the Rov. The Rov of the shul had previously been nifter a few months previous, and she obviously, the almana, was sitting in Yesus Noshim of the shul. Her husband normally gives the share. If I would have gone up to give the share, it would have caused her a few tears to come to her eyes. And those tears are not worth it. But they said, what do you mean? Of course she's crying, her husband died, she's upset, Sim Kippur. The Ziku Arabim that you could have done. And he answered this week's Parashah Vayera, Rabbi Isai. He answered, you're right. What a mitzvah. Moshe Rabbeinu also had a mitzvah. Moshe Rabbeinu also had a Gavaldig Cheshbon. But to cause somebody else tsar, to cause somebody else pain, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth to cause somebody else pain. And Rabbi said we have to think of this. We have to think of this through our lives. We have to train ourselves to start this midah before we get married. I deal with people all the time, couples and men. You can't imagine what these people say to their wives. Unfortunately, they never had the opportunity to work on it. Here right now, Rabbi said, you have the opportunity to work on this midah of being careful what you say, of being careful what you do. If it's going to harm somebody else, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. The Kav Halacha brings a tremendous maisa. He brings a maisa with the Arizal, that the Arizal was once staying in a certain place, and he was staying in a certain place, and when he finished staying there, the Balabas went to see him out. The Arizal said, let me ask you something. I would like very much to pay you back. I would like very much to give you something for all the hospitality that you gave me. So he said to Arizal, I'll tell you, there's nothing you can give us. Over my wife, he said, had many children, Baruch Hashem, at the beginning of our marriage, and for some reason everything stopped. She stopped having children. It stopped. And we're wondering why. So Arizal thinks for a minute, puts his head down, and he comes up with a reason. He said, listen to this. This is a powerful word. He said it goes like this. There was, in the little downstairs of the house, they had a chicken coop where little chicks used to make eggs. They used to breed these chicks. And these chicks had a little ladder. And this ladder would slowly go up step by step to a little place where there was a bowl of water there. And this bowl of water came from the ceiling where it used to drip down from the rain. It wasn't put there intentionally. But the chicks knew this is where to get water. For some reason, at some point, the woman, the wife, this man, took away the ladder. For no reason whatsoever. She didn't know what she was doing. She took away the ladder. At that moment, the chicks could no longer go up the ladder. They could no longer get their water. And because of that, it caused them tsar. They cried to the Ribono Shel Olam. And that cry caused her not to have any more children. Rabbi said, these are little chicks already. We're not dealing with human beings. But how careful you have to be in somebody else's feelings. How careful you have to be not to laugh at somebody else. What remarks you say to somebody else. What action you can make that can cause someone harm for years and years and years to come. You have no idea the koyach of your action. You have no idea that when you say something to someone, a quick joke, a quick making fun of, and you think to yourself, oh, what's the big deal? And you walk away. For 20 years, this person can be suffering by what you said 20 years previous. And for you, it was a small comment, a little joke, tiny little joke. Come on, Rabbi, what are you saying? I'm going to be careful what I say. Oh boy, every word that you say, every action that you do, every remark that you make has such a tremendous impact on other people, has such a tremendous thing that you have to be so careful that what you're saying doesn't affect somebody else. Your actions have a koyach to affect people in a way that you can't imagine. There was a maisa with a certain rabbi. They had a shiur in a big shul, hundreds and hundreds of people there. Choshev Rov got up to speak. And what they used to do they used to daven mincha, and then they would have the speech. So most people came for mincha. After mincha, you have the speech. That's how it goes. So this Rav, wherever he was, wanted to hear this big maggid who came, wherever he was, and he wanted to hear it, but he missed mincha, but he came in time for the speech. So he sits himself down over there for the speech, and he's looking at his watch for a minute, and he realizes, oh no, shiur is coming. It's sundown. and therefore I won't be able to daven mincha anymore. He didn't daven mincha, everybody else did. So he thinks to himself, what am I meant to do? I'm in the middle of the speech right now. Middle of the shit. What am I to do? Shkia, mincha, what's going to be with mincha? And he's going backwards and forwards thinking, what should I do? He thinks to himself, you know what I'll do? I'll inch out, I'll stay in the seated position, and slowly I'll inch out from chair to chair, and he probably won't notice me. But it really upset him, it bothered him. And afterwards he was thinking, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? He's not sure. So he decided that what he's going to do is, he's going to go to the Chazon Ish. He's going to see what the Chazon Ish has to say. So he goes to the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish says, he asks the Shaila, he goes to the Chazon Ish, he said, Rebbe, I have a Shaila. What do you do if you're in the middle of a speech, and Mincha's arriving, the time of Mincha is finishing, after that time you'll not going to be able to daven Mincha anymore, what do? Do you stay in the speech, not stay in the speech? The Chazon Ish said, what's the question? How can you leave a speech in the middle? What a chutzpah it is from the Maggid Sheikh. Mincha is a wonderful thing. But that overrides somebody else's feelings? Somebody's going to be hard. I'm going to ask you, Rabbi Yisai. There were 300 people sitting over there. Do you honestly think that the Maggid Sheikh, that the rabbi standing there giving the share, it makes a difference if one person leaves? Come on, he's a rabbi. He probably has somewhere to get a share. He probably has a mincha. I mean, don't look at Kashrus. The answer is maybe you're right. But if there's a slight chance that what you're doing is going to cause someone else harm, Rabbi Yisai, I have to tell you, it's just poshut, not worth it. There's a minig, La'aleinu, Rachman al-Islam, we should never know of such a minig, but there is such a minig. By Levaya, the close relatives of the nifta normally ask mechila for the nifta, and they normally say, we'd like to ask mechila if we did anything during the lifetime that wasn't nice, please be moichalas. This is the last opportunity we'll have to ask you, and that's what they normally do. At the Levaya, when Rav Zalman Auerbach, one of the Gedolei Adar, was actually having the Levaya of his wife. So everybody was waiting at the point of the Levaya that it's normally done for the Mechila. They waited for Rav Zalman to ask Mechila. And eventually he wasn't coming. So someone thought maybe he forgot. Nebuch is in a lot of tzar, a lot of pain. So somebody sort of nudged him and said, Rebbe, ask for Mechila. And Rav Zalman looked at him and said, Mechila? Mechila for what? I have never said anything to my wife in all the years of being married, ever, that can cause her harm. Nothing. Not one word. And Rabbi said, I'm not talking about your roommates. I'm not talking about your rebbeim. I'm not talking about your parents. I'm talking about somebody that you will spend 40, 50, 60, 70 years with every single day of your life. And if Rabbi Zalman could say with a certainty, I have never said a word that may have caused her harm. You know what that means? You know what that work of character is? You know what it means to have a koyach, to have the strength to say, I never hurt somebody. You know how much rage that is. I'd like to finish, Rabbi Yisai, with a couple of amazing stories that I saw over here in the book. The stories go as follows. There was during the Israeli War of Independence, so the tension was very, very high. It was difficult to walk around Yerushalayim. There were missiles flying left, right, and center. And at one point, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, Rabbi Zalman lived in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Zalman Meltzer lived in that time. He was an old man. He was frail. He was sick. It was difficult for him. And at one point, they were all in the place, hiding away from all the bombs. And whatever happened, a bomb managed to reach inside the window, and it hit Rabbi Zalman on his leg. And the Talmud saw what happened. He ran over to his rabbi and he sort of hugged him in a way to protect him from anything else. And he looked and he saw down that on Rabbi Zalman, the Rebbe's leg, there was bleeding, mamish, flying blood all over the place. It was a real sakana. So he said, Rebbe, Rosh Yeshiva, what are we going to do? I'm going outside to call for help. I must scream for help. We must find somebody. And Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Zalman said, no, you're not going anywhere. You're staying right here. You're staying right here. And he said, why, Rebbe, you're going to die. This is a mamish b'koach nefesh. I must call somebody. Rabbi Zalman said, no, I'll tell you why. If you're going to go out and you're going to say that Rabbi Zalman Meltzer is sick and we need immediate, assistance, medical, whatever it is, people are going to start running. Who wouldn't run when they hear that name? Everyone will start running. It's a sakana to be on the street. There's no reason to cause other people to be in a massive sakana. And he told them at the situation to light candles, which is the meaning for people that normally die. You light candles at the time. And that's what he did. Baruch Hashem, he made it, he was saved, he had a refuah. But his ava for other people, his reasoning that what? Don't let somebody else suffer. Yes, I need it, but other people are going to suffer. And that's something that he couldn't cope. That's something that he didn't want to do. There was a true mice in Gates of Yeshiva. In Gates of Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Avi Wiesenfeld Shlita, he was a tremendous Rosh Yeshiva Shlita that at one point in Yeshiva, true mice in this one, there was some Bachman who decided that they're going to lock themselves into the library and they're going to play some games, whatever it was. So they locked themselves in the library, the Yeshiva, all the Sfarim, they lock the door and they start playing whatever they're playing. So what happens next is they get a knock on the door. Knock on the door. So they just ignore it. We're busy right now. We're not into the knocking doors right now. So eventually they knock on the door. Louder and louder and louder and louder. And eventually it says, please open the door. Please open the door. It's the Rosh Yeshiva Leib Gurvitz. It's the Rosh Yeshiva Leib Gurvitz. I need a Sefira. And they're like, oh yeah, sure you do. Very nice. You can't come in. And he knocks. No, it's the Rosh Yeshiva, it's Leib Gurvitz, please. I need a Sefira to prepare B'Shir. Oh yeah, Leib Gurvitz, I'm sure you need a Sefira right now to prepare B'Shir. Well, sorry, it's being clean right now. And they were having lots of fun, and they were joking, and they were laughing in the background. And he's knocking and saying, please, boys, it's the Rosh Yeshiva, it's Leib Gurvitz. I need to come into the room. I have a share to give it, I need to... And they were messing around. Yeah, Rosh Yeshiva, I'm sure you do. And the back of the board laughing. And during, they were looking at each other thinking, this guy's a really good impersonator. This guy's really good because it sounds really like the Rosh Yeshiva. This sounds amazing. And they eventually, after a couple more times, they looked at each other and they said, oh no. There's one of two options. Either the guy's great and he impersonates Rosh Yeshiva amazing, or we're in serious trouble. And they started to figure, what are we going to do now? They looked at the closest window. There were 7 floors down. No chance of climbing out that window. So they figured there's only one option. Open the door, suffer the consequences. So they open the door, and they don't even look. They just open the door, and they put their heads down as if like they're terribly ashamed. And they wait, and it's silent. And they look up slowly, and they see, that's the Rosh Yeshiva with the big frock, the black frock. They see the white beard. But what they saw after that was a sight that remained with them for the rest of their lives. The Rosh Yeshiva had his he had his hands over his eyes. He didn't want to see who it was. Because the Rosh Yeshiva understood that if he would see who it was, the embarrassment that will cause these Bachrim, every time he sees Rosh Yeshiva, they'll be so embarrassed, they'll be so upset, it will bother them. That he didn't want to cause on somebody else. The Gedolim understood what it means to embarrass somebody else. Chazal tell us that a person has to walk into a furnace, into an oven, into a fire, rather than embarrass somebody else. To embarrass, to insult somebody else can cause, as we mentioned, harm for the next 20 years. An innocent remark, an innocent joke, an innocent prank. Oh, it's funny and everybody laughs. Oh, I'm sure it is when you're on the other end, not when you're on the receiving end. When you're on the receiving end, it's not so funny. Because all of a sudden, it's not such a joke because everybody's laughing at you. Rabbi Sai, this week's Powershell, Sefira, Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us the Yesod. And that Yesod is, it can be a tremendous mitzvah, a real mitzvah, I've got to do it. Such a mitzvah. But if somebody is going to be harmed, if somebody's going to have a tsar, if someone's going to be paid by what you do, the biggest mitzvah in the world is worth nothing. Rabbi said it's a limud for us, a limud hashkafa, how we can learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, and we have to learn. We shouldn't learn like Paroi. Paroi we see from the Makkahs of this week's parasha. After every Makkah, Moshe Rabbeinu comes in and says, look, you see, it's true, let them out. Oh, Paroi says, you're right, tell them to go out, I love you guys, the God of the Jews is right, tell them to go out. 5 minutes later, what happens? Back to normal. Why? Because Paroi never believed it. Paroi never believed it. Rabbi said we have an opportunity to learn from the parasha. We have an opportunity to take these words of the Rebbeinu Shalom and the Torah. Every word is mamish kolidish hakadosh, every letter, and it's teaching us a skill that we should get for the rest of our lives, that we should get with our relationship with our friends, with our roommates, eventually with our wives. If we don't train ourselves now, how do you expect to get married and never cause pain and harm to your wife? You should be able at the end of your life, like Moshe Zalman did, to get up and say, no, I never insulted somebody else. That's a koyach, Rabbi Yisai. And that's the koyach we learned from this week's parasha, which we have to understand and we have to learn. This is the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us. This is the lesson of the Powershell. Be so careful with your words. Be careful with your actions. Be careful with your gestures. Because if somebody's going to be harmed by what you do, then it's not worth it. A good Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.